All right. So today's lesson, we're talking about justifiably bitter. Um, and like when we think about the Bible, we think about being justifiably bitter. That's kind of like, how can you say that? How can you say that? We're talking about God, but what examples can we have in the Bible where people are justifiably bitter? Well, the answer is that's according to perception. If you believe that you have good reason to be bitter, then you're gonna be bitter anyway. But that all just stems from not really having the trust in God that we need to have. So we're just gonna look at some stories in the Bible today, talk about them. This lesson was when I was looking for examples came to my mind about what to talk about. Stories about people being bitter. There's actually too many stories, so I kind of had to just streamline it just to make it smaller. So the first person we're going to talk about is the man that was at the pool of Bethesda. So in John chapter 5, starting at verse 2, it says, Now there is at Jerusalem by the sheep market a pool, which is called in the Hebrew tongue Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of impotent folk, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain season in the pool and troubled the water. Whosoever then first after the troubling of the water stepped in was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. So, let me read verse 5. It says, in verse 5 it says, And a certain man was there which had an infirmity 38 years. So, just recapping what we just read, there was a pool in Bethesda where every year an angel would go down there and trouble the water, and whoever was the first person to get into the water was made whole. We know the story, right? Can you imagine? And it says there was a great multitude of people waiting for this to happen. They knew it was going to happen. They were waiting for it to happen. But they knew the reality of things, which was only one person was going to get healed that day. That means that out of that great multitude, let's just say if it was 100 people, 99 people are going to leave being bitter because only one person is going to get healed that day. And so, the question is like, how this man he had his infirmity for 38 years. How many years was he waiting there by that pool? How many people, what's the stories of everybody else that was sitting there waiting? How many people, what was their mindset going into it? Did they go into it saying, today's going to be the day I'm going to get healed? I'm going to be the one that step into that pool today because I know what I need to do, but I'm going to make sure that I put myself in a position to get there. So when we look at that and we think about it, knowing that there can be only one, that got to be pretty soul crushing to know that that there's only one opportunity to get this right. And you've probably been praying to God and saying, God, let this be me this year. And it wasn't you, right? So just putting you in the mindset of the man that's at the pool waiting to get that healing. So then after that, then we go to verse 6, it says, when Jesus saw him lie and knew that he had been now a long time in that case, he said unto him, wilt thou be made whole? So Jesus asked him a question. This man waiting to be made whole. So Jesus asked him, are you going to be made whole? Today he's like, are you going to get? Are you going to receive that blessing? Right. So the man answers him. He says in verse 7, he says, the impotent man answered him Sir, I have no man when the water is troubled to put me in the pool, but while I am coming, another steps down before me. So here's the crazy part about this story. This there, and he's like, Jesus. So Jesus says, "Are you going to get made? Are you going to get healed today?" And he says, basically, no. He's like, because nobody's going to help me get healed. So it's that space. It's that space where you want something to happen. You want God to heal you. You want God to move in your life, but and you go there, but you don't go further. You just stop right there. You just lay at the pool, looking at somebody else receive a blessing that could have been extended to you. So when Jesus asked him, "Are you going to be made whole?" His bitterness is like, nobody's going to help me. Every time I've tried, I've failed. Every time I tried to go there, somebody steps in my way to keep me from being made whole. Because as we remember, there's a multitude of people waiting to get healed. And like I said, if it's 100 people waiting by that pool, 99 people are going to go home disappointed every year. And that continuously grows. But that little bit of hope you have that is going to happen for you may bring you there, but stepping out on faith to make that connection is what Jesus is talking to the man about, right? So he says to Jesus, nobody's going to help me get made whole. Then in verse 8, Jesus said unto him, "Rise, take up your bed and walk." And immediately the man was made whole and took up his bed and walked. And on the same day was the Sabbath. So Jesus helped him to make that connection. But how many years was that man sitting there being bitter about him being skipped over? So that's some of us, and our walk with God, some of us may feel that way. Some of us may have that justifiable bitterness, especially when you see God blessing another brother or sister in Christ. And you see God doing something, moving in their life, you're like, God, why is this not happening to me? And the sad part about it is, like, we have those opportunities in front of us, but we have to step out and make that connection with God so we can receive it. There was the story of the lobster. I was showing, I don't know if you guys know about lobsters, but lobsters have lobsters go through a molting process where basically a molting process where, you know how you see a lobster, they have the claws and they have like the whole hard external shell and all of that. Like from everything that you see when you look at a lobster, that all of that can be molted, which just to say that it can be shed away. So basically, a lobster, in order for lobsters to grow, they have to get so tight in their shell that they have to break out of it. They got to shed that shell and allow another one to come up in its place. So, like, if you get the opportunity to look at a lobster shedding its shell, it's pretty nice. And the only thing that's going to be left over is like an empty shell, claws and everything, claws and tails and everything else, the same way cicadas are. You know how they come out of their shell? It's the same difference with lobsters. And the thing I like about that story is that that's how it is when we make that connection with God, when we trust in Him and we allow ourselves to come out of that shell and to grow. What would have made that man's connection? What made that man's connection with God grow is him trusting in God and allowing himself to step out. Because he was there so long, he could allow that bitterness to shut him down. But because Christ came along and the man's faith was, and Christ met him in his faith. That's what helped him to grow. And I wanted to show that in a different way with a different story down here, but I kind of really like it. And I kind of jumped the gun on it, but I'll just continue with it. But if you get a chance to see how a lobster grows, it's pretty amazing. But so let me move on to another part about Naomi. So Naomi in the Bible, she was a woman. Well, I'll read her story and then I'll come back with a recap. Ruth chapter 1 verse 1 says, "Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. And the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah, and they came into the country of Moab and continued there. And Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. And they took them wives of the women of Moab. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they dwelled there about 10 years. So basically, the story of Naomi is that she had a husband. She had 2 sons by her husband. All of them died. The husband died, and the 2 sons died. And the 2 sons was married to 2 daughters, two women from Moab. And what happened is, when back then, if you didn't have anybody to survive you, so like if you had sons and your sons died and they had wives, then you would naturally produce another child, another boy to give to that wife, so that she'll have somebody to look out for her. And that way the mother would have somebody to take care of her as well. So now Naomi is in a place where she doesn't have anybody to take care of her because her sons are dead and her husband is dead. So we skip down from verse 5 to verse 19, from verse 4 to verse 19. It says, this was a big problem for Naomi because she really didn't have anybody to take care of her at this point, right? And she told her daughters-in-law to just basically go home because there's nothing left. God has dealt with her harshly, and she's like, there's no more help for me. So that's what we're looking at when we jump down to verse 19. It says, in verse 19 it says, so they 2 went until they came to Bethlehem, and it came to pass when they were come to Bethlehem that all the city was moved about them, and they said, is this Naomi? And she said unto them, call me not Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. This woman said that God had dealt so harshly with her, she didn't even want to keep her name. So Mara means bitter. And some of us may not be willing to go to that point of changing our name, but we may feel in our life sometime that things aren't going the way that we want them to go. And we kind of wish that we could change. If our names had meanings the way that it used to, some of us would walk around with they go little hater right there. They go a little bitter. If our names were a reflection of who we are now, then we would definitely have a lot of names. But the point is, Naomi was so she felt that God had dealt with her. Naomi means pleasant in Hebrew, but she said, just call me bitter. She's like, there's nothing good about me. God is forsaken me. Right? So some of us may feel that way. Even Job's wife. Job's wife said, after Job went through everything he went through, in Job chapter 2, verse 9, it says, then his wife said to him, are you still holding firmly to your integrity? Curse God and die. So she felt like God had did their family so wrong that She was like, just forget about God. That may put us, it may put some of us in a place where we feel that, you know, things may happen in our life where we feel like we're justifiable in being bitter against God. We may not know God's plan, but we know what's happening to us. We know that what's going on with us is pressing. And when you love God and when you tell people stories about God and you talk about how good God is and how somebody else should be a follower of Him, you know, and they start seeing your life going down the tubes, you know, and then, you know, they start giving you that type of advice. I was going to do more to, you know, even Job's friends. Job talks about in Job chapter 19 how his friends turned against him. He said that his very breath in the presence of his wife was, you know, she was just upset to hear him still breathing. You know, his brothers, everybody had abandoned him. And in Job chapter 19, he talks about it. He's like, what did I even do to anybody? But that's a lot, you know. Life challenges can make us bitter, you know. And a lot of us say that, you know, like Naomi, she lost her husband and her sons. And basically she was at a point where it was going to be really hard to survive because she didn't have any means, right? So she lost her income. Job lost his whole family except for his wife and all his income. And everything that we hold dear, you know, once it gets stripped from us, then you're just left face with God and trying to figure out why did God allow this to happen. And that may make some of us bitter. That man that was sitting there by the pool waiting, he was waiting at that pool for 38 years. Well, let me rephrase that. He was waiting at that pool to be healed. But he didn't know that he was waiting on God's glory to come forward. But still, that was part of God's plan to heal him on that day. But we have to, so even though you may see things and say, this is a good reason for me to be bitter, you have to trust in God and to know that God, everything that God does, all things work together for good for those that believe and trust in God. And no matter what it looks like, God is always going to get the glory out of something. God always wants things to be good for you. Even though you may be going through stuff, you have to rely on God to pull you through that. Like I said, there was too many stories in the Bible. People who walk with Christ. The story of Martha. Well, Martha and really Mary, when we look at Lazarus being raised up. In John chapter 11, starting at verse 1, it says, now a certain man was sick, named Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary which anointed the Lord with an ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore her sister sent unto him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. When Jesus heard that, he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. So, here's the story so far. Lazarus is the brother of Mary and Martha. Jesus loved Lazarus. Jesus loved Mary and Martha, so those were his people. He had love for them. So they sent him word that Lazarus was sick. And Jesus sent a word back. He said, don't worry about it. It's not sick unto death. He said, but it's for the glory of God. Basically what he was telling her was, it's God's plan that this is going to happen this way. Right? He said, don't even worry about it. God got it. He said, we got this. And so when you get that word back, you thinking to yourself, all right, good. We spoke to the man we spoke to the Son of God. We seen him heal. We seen him do all of this. If he says it's going to be all good, then it's all good. They probably kick their feet up, right? They was like, all right, Lazarus, I understand you're sick, but we spoke to Jesus, and he going to take care of it, right? But when we look at verse 5, it says, now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Verse 6, it says, when he had heard, therefore, that he was sick, he abode 2 days still in the same place where he was. So, now, how long was it? 48 hours. How many hours did they sit back, like, looking out the window, like, Jesus is coming any day, any time now? Because we just told him that Lazarus is sick. We know that he loves Lazarus. He got to be on his way right now. I know, because he heals, and that's what he does. So he has to be on his way right now. They looking out the window. They probably walking to the crossroads, looking all the way. They probably don't have binoculars, but they got some makeshift thing where they can see in the distance. They probably even sent some people back just to remind him to say, hey, you remember Lazarus dying. You get an opportunity to come take a look at him. He's still dying. Maybe you don't understand that, but this is where it's at. It's like we told you 2 days ago that Lazarus was dying. You need to be making your way here, right? So then we look at verse 7. It says, then after that said he to his disciples, let us go into Judea again. So after 2 days of him getting the word, he waited. He was like, all right, now we can go down. All right, and in verse 8 it says, his disciples said unto him, Master, the Jews of late sought to stone you, and goes thither again. Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in a day? If any man walk in the day, he stumble not, because he seeth the light of this world. But if a man walk in the night, he stumble, because there is no light in him. These things said he, and after that he said unto them, our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may awake him out of his sleep. Right? And then in verse 12 it says, then said his disciples, Lord, if he sleep, he does well. Howbeit Jesus spake of his death, but they thought he had spoken of taking a rest in sleep. Right? So then in verse 14 it says, then said Jesus unto them plainly, Lazarus is dead. Right? So these people are thinking this whole time, Jesus is trying to tell them that God has a plan. The same way he sent word back to Martha. God has a plan for what's going on here. And everybody think it's all good when Lazarus is sleeping. But Jesus, like, when he said Lazarus is dead, then can you imagine the way their eyes looked? They probably bucked up and like, what? Lazarus is dead. Why did we wait here 2 days? We could have saved him. We could have done something. You said you love this man, but you let him die. These are the things that are starting to form in people's minds at this point. Jesus sleep at the wheel again. It's probably what some people thought. Verse 15 it says, Jesus said, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, to the intent you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go unto him. So Jesus said, I'm glad that I wasn't there, that he said, so I can increase your faith. Right? So they still looking like, what are you talking about? You just let Lazarus die. You just let that man die. Right? But Jesus talking about, I'm glad he died. That would have been a hard walk. There probably been a lot of questions coming from me. Like, I don't know. I'm like, wait, you just letting people die? People you love die? So that would have been a problem. But so Jesus like, I'm glad he died. So I don't know how you feel about that, but there's probably some bitterness starting to rise up. Some new leadership questions need coming into play. Like maybe he ain't the person that need to be leading this band. All right, verse 16 it says, then said Thomas, which is called Didymus, unto his fellow disciples, let us also go, that we may die with him. Verse 17, then when Jesus came, he found that he had lain in the grave 4 days already. So now Lazarus has been dead 4 days. 2 days ago, so when Jesus got the word, First of all, think about this. Lazarus was in the grave 4 days, which meant that he was sick 2 days before that. He had been sick. So Martha sent word that Lazarus was sick, right? Jesus waited 2 days, and then he said, let's go, which meant that if Lazarus was in the grave 4 days, it had been at least 6 days since Jesus even decided to come take a look at the situation. So let's just round it off to a week. It's been a whole week. Lazarus has been dead. What type of emotion is raising up in you? We did what we thought what we were supposed to do. We told Jesus, the man who can heal, that Lazarus was sick, and he just said, "All right, we'll take care of that. Put it on the calendar, and we'll look at that later." Right? Lazarus died. 4 days passed. Now Jesus comes strolling along into town. How many of you, if your loved one died, would be happy to see Jesus? Right? How many of you would be like, because he was supposed to heal. He was supposed to do that. You see him heal all type of people. But you told him, and he still allowed Lazarus to die. Verse 18, it says, "Now Bethany was near unto Jerusalem, about 15 furlongs off. And many of the Jews came to Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary sat still in the house. Then said Martha unto Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother had not died." Can you imagine the way that she said that to him? We're just looking at the words, but doesn't that sound like she was judging him when she said, if you'd have been here, my son wouldn't have died. I mean, my brother would not have died. So
she was questioning him.
Yeah, that wasn't no, hey, Jesus, we happy to see you. It was, Jesus, you've been gone at least almost a week. We told you this before when he was sick, when you could have done something about it. But now, he's been dead 4 days. And you're going to send back word saying that it's going to be all right. Right? So now she's just questioning. She's like, if you'd have been here, it would have been all right. So now, do you think that she's bitter? You think she's a little upset to see him?
A little upset, yeah.
Questioning his priorities?
Yes, indeed.
Right. So now we go to verse 22. It says, she says, Martha continues to say, she says, but I know that even now, whatsoever you will ask of God, God will give it to you. So she said, but even now, whatever you ask God to do, he'll do it. Right? So now she's trying to make it seem like she believes that anything's possible, right? Because she said, whatever you ask God, God's going to give it to you. So then Jesus said unto her, your brother shall rise again. So she said that she just told him, whatever you ask God the Father to do, he's going to do it. But then he said, your brother going to rise again. But she said, in verse 24, Martha said unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. So on one side, she said that you can ask God to do anything, he'll do it. On the other side, she's saying that he'll do it at the end, but he won't do it now. Some of our faith is like that. Some of us believe that God has the power to do anything, but that goes into that category of that scripture where it says having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof.
Yeah.
So you may say that God can do anything, but in your mind, you're really just thinking about God is going to do it at the end. You may not think God can do something right now, and she's probably still bitter. Mary loved Jesus the same, but did she go see Mary? Or did she go see Jesus? She didn't even go see him. She was like, it's like Jesus coming. She's like, I'm not even going to see him. I'm gonna keep doing what I was doing the same way he stayed where he was at, doing what he was doing. I'm gonna sit here and do what I'm doing because he didn't move when I needed him to move. And some of us have that bitterness toward God the same way. God isn't moving in your life the way that in a timely fashion. You got him on the clock. You're saying that you believe he can do everything, but when he's not doing it, let me move on. Fill in the rest of those blanks. Verse 25, it says, Jesus said unto her, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believes in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believest thou this? Jesus said, wait a minute. You just said I can do all things through the Father. He said, I can bring anybody back to life. He was like, do you believe it? That's what he just asked her. Do you believe that? So in verse 27, she said unto him, yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, which should come into this world. And when she had so said, she went her way and called Mary, her sister, secretly, saying, the Master is coming and calls for you. As soon as she had heard that, she arose quickly and came unto him. Now Jesus was not yet coming to the town, but was in that place where Martha met him. The Jews then which were with her in the house and comforted her, when they saw Mary, that she rose up hastily and went out, followed her, saying, she goeth unto the grave to weep there. Then when Mary was coming where Jesus was, and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying unto him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother had not died. So Mary and Martha greeted Christ with the same words, right? If you had been here, Lazarus would not have died. Do you think that they were having a conversation about this before before Christ came? They both came up with the same conclusion. Right. So they've been talking about it. They looking out the window. They done checked the crossroads. They probably sent somebody just to check on him again to make sure he understood the gravity of the situation. And now, yeah. So for example, I can't believe I don't see him. I can't believe this is how you treat people you love. So that they done had this whole conversation, which is why they greeted him the same way. Right? But in verse 33, when Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping, which came with her, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. So Jesus knows the plan. He knows what's going to happen. But he knew that it was going to be, that they had to go through that process. He knew people were going to be bitter about that process. Right? And because of that, you know, he still couldn't help but to cry for the people because the people are sad, you know. And in verse 34 it says, and said, where have you laid him? They said unto him, Lord, come and see. Shortest verse in the Bible, verse 35, Jesus wept. So Jesus is crying with them, but he's not crying because he can't bring Lazarus back. He's crying because he feels their emotion, their pain, their anguish. And he knew that he had to go through this. And he knew that they were going to cry. And he knew all this. He knew the whole process. But still, even knowing the process is painful. He knew the people were going to be bitter at him. But that didn't stop him from completing his work. Just because you're bitter at God, that doesn't stop God's process and his plan from coming to pass. But as we can continuously see, even with the man by the pool, even when we see Naomi had a good ending to her story, even though she changed her name to Mara. Mary and Martha, just because you're in the beginning of the process and you don't believe, you want to say you believe God, but all these things are happening in your life where bitterness seems like it's the only option, and that's the way that it has to be. God has a plan for how he's going to do things. Right? Verse 36, it says, then said the Jews, behold, how he loved him. Verse 37, and some of them said, could not this man which opened the eyes of the blind have caused that even that this man should not have died? They was like, he did all of that. he could have saved that man. It's like, why couldn't he have saved Lazarus? So all those things were coming to pass. All the questions, all that. It was like he could have done it. Verse 38, Jesus therefore again, groaning in himself, comes to the grave. It was a cave and a stone lay upon it. Jesus said, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of him that was dead, said unto him, Lord, by this time he stinks, for he has been dead 4 days. So, Martha, the same person you had the conversation with, Martha, do you believe that I can do this? Yes, Lord, I believe. Jesus said, I'm the resurrection. I can bring it back to life anybody I want to. Jesus is telling her, open the grave so I can bring him back. Martha's like, he stinks. And Martha's mind is not clicking. The light is not came on that Jesus is not just going to look at a dead body. He just told you he was the resurrection. He could bring back anybody from the dead. The people are like, we seen you heal people. And it was like, if you would have been here, you could have healed them. Their mind is still over there. They may have even still been willing to follow him, but that always would have lingered. That Jesus may fall asleep at the wheel sometimes, so you gotta remind him of give him direction. Stay on his back. That makes sense to anybody? Look, over here, I'm here. But anyway, so Jesus is still talking to Martha. He's saying, roll back the grave, roll back the stone so I can go in there. She's like, you want to smell a dead man? Right? So in verse 40 it says, Jesus said unto her, said I not unto you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God? He's like, I'm going to remind you again. I just told you a minute ago. I'm going to tell you again, in case for the hearing impaired. I told you the glory of God is going to get, I told you, but you didn't understand it. God is going to get the victory today. So even though you're bitter at me, even though you're upset and you don't understand what God can do, you just said God can do anything he wants. And you said that God hears me, but I'm going to show you so you can see the glory of God. Right? Let's just fill in the blanks for you, just so you can get understanding. Verse 41. Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. And I knew that thou heard me always, but because of the people which stand by, I said it, that they may believe that you have sent me. And when he thus had spoken, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound about with a napkin. Jesus said unto him, loose him and let him go. That was the end story of Lazarus. Lazarus was dead. God had a plan to bring Lazarus back, but in that process, it's hard for us to hold on and it's hard for us not to be bitter at God. The same way Job and Naomi and Martha and everybody. In the beginning, you may feel a certain way about what God is trying to do in your life. But God he doesn't do things for no reason. He doesn't fall asleep at the wheel. He doesn't have to sleep. His body doesn't, he's a spirit. His body doesn't get tired. He doesn't have a body to get tired with. Right? He's always there. And even though we question God and a lot of stuff that he does it for a reason. And he wants to bring us through so that we can see that. But sometimes it's hard for us to hold on to that ride. And God is so good to us that he allows us to throw insults at him and say, God, you don't know what you're doing. Our bitterness rises up so easily with God. But he continues to say, trust me. He continuously says that everything that I'm doing, I know more than what you know. If you say that, then believe me. No matter how many times he say it to us, no matter how many conversations he has with us about it, we still don't understand. We still don't make that connection. We still don't grip it until he shows the end result. But he wants us to trust us through that process, because what ends up happening is we sit back and look at the end. When we get to the end result, we said, I wasted time not trusting him through the process. I put unnecessary bitterness in my heart toward him. And now I got to sit in the place where I'm asking him for forgiveness because I should have just trusted him in the first place. But he's so good to us that he understands that, and he'll say, you know what? Even though you didn't trust me, even though you didn't believe me, like you say that you do, I'm still going to love you and fulfill the promise that I started at work. I'm going to finish it. Even though you may not feel like, even though you may feel God has abandoned you and all that other stuff, even though you may feel like you're justifiably bitter because God allows situations to happen in your life that wasn't the way that you wanted it to be, He has a plan for your life that you know, for you to have a good ending, an expected ending, what the Bible says. Plans for you to prosper. If God said in His Word and you believe that He cannot lie, then you have to continue to trust even though you're going through it.
Yeah.
There was a prophet in Lamentations, and basically he starts off by saying, "I'm a man that has seen affliction by the rod of His wrath. He has led me and brought me into darkness, but not into light. Surely against me is He turned. He turned His hand against me all the day. My flesh and my skin He has made old. He has broken my bones. He has builded against me and compassed me with gall and travail. He has set me in dark places as they that be of old. He has hedged me about that I cannot get out. He has made my chain heavy. Also when I cry and shout, He shuts out my prayer." So he's saying that God is being against him. He said even when he prays to God, God is not listening. God is making, in verse 9 he says, He has enclosed my ways with hewn stone. He has made my paths crooked. He said God is doing stuff against me that I don't even understand. God is turning His back on me. He says, in verse 12, He has bent His bow and set me as a mark for the arrow. You may start feeling like God is doing things against you that are not right. And you see it all throughout the Bible that God has a plan, and when your life isn't going the way that you think it should go, you start looking at God saying, God, why are you doing this to me? Like that, and now I can make that connection with that lobster. When that lobster starts feeling pressure to grow, he has to shed that outer shell in order for him to grow. He has to feel that uncomfortableness. That lobster can sit in that shell and say, he can get real bitter. He can say, why can't I just stay the size that I am? Why do I have to bust out of the shell to grow in my faith? Why do I have to bust out of the shell why do I have to experience another level in order to trust you? In the shell, make the shell bigger.
Yeah.
Don't make me grow out of it. Because the thing about that lobster, when he grows out that shell, he's soft again. That shell is hard and rigid. And he has to bust his soft shell out of it and then grow another harder shell. And that's that whole growing process that God takes us through, that we have to realize that in order for us to reach another level with God and trust Him more, He has to show you something to trust Him in. Otherwise, you're just going to be speaking empty words. You're going to say, God can do it, and then He's going to tell you, I can do it, and you're going to say, I believe you. But you don't really believe Him because you haven't had the opportunity to see something. But when He shows you or brings you through or he starts taking you through something so you can trust him more, then you get mad because he's taking you through that process.
Yeah.
So, what is God saying about that? He's like, do you want to know me more? Do you want to see that I got the power? Or do you want to say, I trust you without even seeing what you can trust me for?
Yeah.
Wow.
Verse 15 in Lamentations chapter 3, it says, he has filled me with bitterness. He has made me drunken with wormwood. He has broken my teeth with gravel stones. He has covered me with ashes. Now I'm going to go down to verse 22, or verse 21. It says, the prophet says, this I recall to my mind, therefore have I hope. It is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed, because his compassion fails not. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. He's saying that all of that, he said God has compassion, so much compassion on us. He says God is faithful to us. In verse 24, he says, the Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore will I hope in him. The Lord is good unto them that wait for him, to the soul that seeks him. It is good that a man should both hope and quietly wait for the salvation of the Lord. It is good for a man that he bear the yoke in his youth. He sits alone and keeps silence, because he has borne it upon him. He puts his mouth in the dust, if it so be that there may be hope. He gives his cheek to him that smites him. He is filled full with reproach. So the prophet is saying that God just let you hit him. You hit him on one side, he just give you his other cheek. He's filled with full of reproach. Everybody questions God. You may start off feeling bitter, but which is what the prophet is saying in the beginning. But then he says, when you think about it from God's perspective, God is full of reproach. Nobody likes God's judgment. You see him doing things in your life, and God is trying to work his plan, but the people that are supposed to be trusting in him are, looking at him like, I wish I never met you because you did something that wasn't according to the way I thought it should go. Right? But God is saying, I'm working a plan. I'm trying to do something that you don't understand, but if you allow me to show you, then you'll see the perfectness of what I'm trying to do. And when you come through it, then you're going to be asking for forgiveness and saying, oh, I should have trusted you before.
Yeah.
But for some of us, God continuously brings us through that process, and every time we don't trust him. Every time we don't trust him. When we're going through that process, God is saying, trust me like you did last time. Lean on that. Because if you trusted me then, I'm still going to be the same God. I'm still going to bring you through if you just trust me. I have the power. If you say I got the power to do it, roll back the grave so I can walk in there and bring back to life that thing that you thought was dead. If you thought that job or that career that I wanted you to go into is dead, roll back the grave, see if I don't have the power to do it. If you don't think that your life can be changed and you want to sit by the pool waiting for somebody to come along, try me. God is saying, I will do what I say I will do. Don't just say that I can do it and then not believe it. Because you don't believe it. But I'm going to put you in a situation where you can believe me, and all thing I'm asking you to do is just meet me there. The last three verses I want to read is this. Well, last two. Lamentations 3, verse 40 and 41 says, let us search and try our ways and turn again to the Lord. Let us lift up our heart with our hands unto God in the heavens. Everything that we're going through, even though we may feel like it's justifiable for us to be bitter towards God, God is going to take that reproach and still work his plan for your good. He wants to do it. It was his plan from the beginning. But you have to bust out of that shell. You have to allow God to show you, take you to that deeper level with him. You can't be on the shallow end of the pool and not allow God to show you stuff so that, otherwise you will never truly believe him. One of the things that I run into a lot is I share my faith with almost everybody I encounter. And almost everybody I encounter, they say, I believe in God, I trust God. But then they'll say something totally opposite in their next words. I don't even know half the time if they even skip, if they even take a breath before they talk about what God can't do between when they talk about what God can do. And they talk about their experience with God in a way that I'm like, it don't even seem like you know him. It's not real. It's just words to you. But in order for God to show you that it's not just words, he has to take you through something to show you that it's not just words. But you have to be willing to go. Because if you're not willing to go, how can he show you? God wants to do something in each and every one of our lives to show you that he's real. And he did it in my life. He showed me that he's real. He showed me that in a way that I can't not doubt him. I understand people who can doubt God. I understand it. Because maybe he didn't show you the way he showed me. Maybe he haven't took you through the experiences. Maybe your shell is a lot smaller than mine. But he's taken me through so many different levels with him. I just keep thinking, how much deeper can I go with the Lord? How much further can I go with him? How much more can I trust him to do? What God wants to do while you have your time on earth is to take you deeper and deeper with him before you see him, to trust him. He wants you to trust him where you're at now, so that when you get into the kingdom, you're not looking around scraping gold and diamonds off the gates to see if that's real. He don't want you stuffing stuff in your pocket saying, in case this goes away, I got some diamonds and rubies to take with me. God wants to take you through a deeper level with him, but he wants you to start trusting him now. And he's going to take you through those processes. And you have to allow that process to grow so that you're not looking like a fool towards the end, continuously asking for forgiveness when you should have trusted in the beginning. Don't be like Martha, Martha, justifiably so, is probably sitting in heaven right now saying, man, I had to be used as the example. But it's good that she was used as the example, because if she wasn't, then your story would probably be in there, or somebody else's. But God is going to get that glory out of that. So allow him to do his work in your life so that you're not sitting in your bitterness at him, and no matter who you want to blame and say, I'm not bitter at God, I'm bitter at my boss for putting me in this situation. Your boss God put your boss in that position. So it still goes back to you being mad at God. Any situation where something went wrong in your life, God allowed that to happen. So when you walk around with that bitterness in your heart, you're saying, God, your judgment was wrong. You fell asleep at the wheel. If you had been here, it would not have happened. But God is trying to show you that he's always there. No matter what you say about him, he's still there. He's still in control. And he wants you to have that trust in him that there is a plan for your life that he's going to bring you through. Questions, comments, concerns?